welcome to School Talk. I'm Nadja Varney, your host. We've had a World Summit on climate. So how important is environmental education? Well, I'm delighted today to welcome a favorite guest of mine, the attorney, Frank Vail. He's an environmental engineer, and currently he's the assistant professor and department chair at Mass Maritime Academy. He's also a professor at the College of the Holy Cross. And indeed, he was voted one of the top lawyers in the environmental field. So it's not only a joy, but it is especially important to me because Mr. Vail, or Attorney Vail, was very supportive of School Talk in its early days, and he's sort of our environmental guru. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Nadja. It's a pleasure.
Well, you know, I was looking back, and you've been on the show since about 1995, I think, at least 6 times as we've developed through the topic.
Yeah, you've followed my career, haven't you?
Yes, I've been following you, Frank. But I remember when I first met you in Attleboro, you served as the Environmental Council and worldwide director of the Environmental Safety and Health Department. It was for Sensata. Formerly that was Texas Instruments,
Correct.
the Census and Control Groups. And I read that you were chairman of the International Environment Law Committee for the Boston Bar Association, and you're involved in many other environmental organizations. So thank you for all your work on behalf of letting me breathe.
Well, thank you, Nadja. You're too kind.
Well, I was wondering right now, as I mentioned, we have this global summit that went on at the United Nations, and now we have new technologies. In general, I just like your overview because you've been involved across the world and within this United States in education. What's your opinion? What's your perspective on how we're doing in the last 10 years?
I think we've made great progress. We certainly have a long way to go. But we've moved more from a compliance sort of program into more sustainability. You know, I think the public is now aware that environmental issues are very important for the well-being of society. And I'm always amazed with younger children to see how, as they come into high schools or even younger, understanding the complexities of environmental issues. 10, 15 years ago, it was more about recycling or don't pour that into the water. But now there's a real understanding of the science that goes on and the impact. And I think that there's a deep concern for the environment.
So you see that in general, it's not just among the academics or the scientists.
Oh, no.
You're seeing this into society now?
We're driven more from a compliance society into a sustainability. Now, we still have compliance issues, but I think the key word now in the environmental arena is sustainability.
And by that, sustainability, you mean to just keep going and improving?
Endurance.
Enduring.
Being able to endure. You know, there's many definitions of it. The one I like to use is that the resources we use now will be readily available for future generations, regardless of how big the population grows, so that we don't take from future generations. And that covers a wide variety of different issues.
Well, you know, it's interesting how you say that the general populace is seeing more of the sustainability, and yet I was quite shocked. I don't know if it was C-SPAN or where I saw Senator Inhofe. He wrote a book called The Greatest Hoax: How the Global Warming Conspiracy Threatens Your Future. He was talking to a scientist, and I was actually embarrassed for him to be thinking that he could talk against you know, pollution and all the scientific understandings now of the environment. So one of the things he said is the EPA needs to be constrained. And there are people wanting the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency,
Correct.
to be cut back. Can you define what the EPA is? I know well, you define it, and what does it do?
Well, as you said, it's the federal government Environmental Protection Agency. And ultimately, the goal of the EPA is to take legislation or laws that have been created by Congress and implement them through different types of regulations. So they're responsible for clean water, clean air, as you said, climate change now, which is, well, there was a fairly large case on that. as to whether they should have jurisdiction over it. But their responsibility is to ensure that the environment is protected from a federal perspective. And I think, the EPA has done a good job. I don't think it should be cut back at all. I think, but I do think some of the issues that they're working on could be better defined.
Such as?
I think climate change is one. I think that that they need to move a little bit quicker at developing some of the regulations, and I think that they need to get the experts in. One of the biggest problems I've seen throughout my career is a lot of times regulations are written without a full knowledge of the scientific or engineering applications, and sometimes they don't get it right, And so I'm sure they're aspiring towards that, but my hope is that, they're able to take scientific knowledge and embody it into regulations that make sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hear from people more in the business world, there are some questions about, whether the EPA should have anything to say to them. Actually, recently I heard about a book by Andrew Savitz.
I know
it's called The Triple Bottom Line. You know him?
Yes.
You know him. Well, you've been in this field, which is wonderful. But I picked out a sentence from his book. He said, "Your company's sweet spot is where its financial interests coincide with social and environmental interests." So how are the corporations and businesses doing with the sustainability you're talking about?
Well, I think a good corporation recognizes that to be successful, they need to take into account environmental issues. One, compliance. That's a given. You don't pollute any longer. You don't cause damage to the environment that might have an impact on human health. The next step is that sustainable question. Why wouldn't you want to develop technology that will be beneficial for the future? Let's develop a car that can get 100 miles per gallon. Let's develop different types of products that don't use the toxic materials. In fact, there's a program now, international program, in which for years we were concerned about what went up the stack during manufacturing, what went out into the water or into the earth. But we failed to realize that many of the same constituents that are pollutants go into products, and what happens to the products when they're no longer useful? They're thrown away, they're incinerated, and now the pollutants go right back in. So many countries, especially the European Union, has developed a program where you must disclose exactly what the materials are in your products, in the components. And that allows them then to determine whether they'll accept it or not.
This is interesting because I just read, this is very to the point and local, but I read that the plastic that some of the cleaners put over your clothes when you bring them home, that you shouldn't keep that plastic on your clothes in the closet because there's something in that product, not maybe all of them, but there are certain, this is so interesting that you're talking about it, and I just worried about it when I went to pick up my cleaning.
Well, the whole concept is, let's try to accomplish what we need, but do it in a manner that protects the environment. Mm-hmm. And that gets into a very interesting concept. You know me as an environmental engineer, an attorney, and I've been trained as that. The real individuals out there that will make a difference will be the design engineers, the manufacturing engineers, the chemists, the people who, when they're doing things, are saying, well, I'm going to make this car, but why don't I consider the environmental aspects of it also? And they'll take their expertise into the manufacturing process. And I think that's happening. You asked me about corporate America or corporations throughout the world. That's being ingrained, and it's even being taught in universities now. We're teaching our students who are going to be electrical engineers or chemical engineers, we're teaching them to consider the environment, consider what type of products you use, consider what its impact might be on the environment and human health.
This is so interesting because way before we were this advanced, it's back when you came to Finberg School from Texas Instruments and brought a wonderful program to our first graders about ecology. And
whales, I believe.
Oh, it was whales. What a memory you have. But that was wonderful because it was a beginning. Our young children, kindergarten, first grade, had very little information. And you took some very complex ideas and made them very simple for the children to understand. It was a fun day. And that's when I captured you for our show, way back then in the 90s. But I was thinking of a first grader. Her name was Silaja. Her parents came from India. And I used to bring in plastic bags for them to carry things home in. And we were learning that plastic bags, you know, have some pollution to them. And you know all about why and how. And so Silaja came up to me. She was my assistant teacher, by the way, 6 years old. And she said, Mrs. Barney, we could just recycle and bring them back again, and then we could carry our things home again with them. And so there early on, you inspired my class.
Well, I mean, that's good. I think, you know, it's the younger generation that's coming up that has to think this way. And I do think, I mean, you see more and more people now going to supermarkets, bringing cloth bags.
I do that, yes.
Because you're correct. Plastic has an impact, and it has a significant impact in aquatic environments, you know? Well,
not only aquatic, I heard, now you're the environmentalist and the expert, but I heard that they used to bury them, but in order for some of these newer plastic products to disintegrate, they need the sun. So how does that happen? Is that true?
They don't degrade.
They just don't.
They just stay there.
Oh, yeah. So, well, let's move now from the climate change and there to, you're at the Maritime Academy, so I'm thinking about water down there. I read, years and years ago, I read the book called The Source, where there were stories of centuries that culminate in the discovery of a well at a tell where archaeologists are digging. And it reminded me of how basically important water is. And I was thinking, if pollution gets out of hand, there could be future wars around water. So I'm going to ask you, what are the problems that threaten right now to degrade the quality of our water? And are there any solutions right now?
Well, I'll answer it first by saying there are solutions, but there are significant issues associated with water. You picked a perfect topic. If you look in many developing nations throughout the world, their water supplies are heavily contaminated with human sewage and many different types of pollutants that come about. And they really haven't developed a protocol or a system to take care of it. In fact, our students from Mass Maritime go down to Haiti and are actually working on developing clean water because they realize how important it is. I mean, children are dying in different countries at an alarming rate due to dysentery. And how do you cure dysentery? You give them clean water, and they don't have clean water in some of these areas. But it goes further than that. It goes into our water supplies are being contaminated, and one of the biggest contaminants is a thing called eutrophication.
Eutrophication?
Eutrophication, nutrient enrichment. Nitrogen and phosphorus going into the waters, our receiving streams, our oceans, and creating significant biomass blooms. They're basically fertilizers. So they come from agricultural uses, which we desperately need to produce the yield of our food crops, comes down the river, gets into ocean, into water bodies, creates massive growth of algae and plant life. And like everything else, that plant life dies, sinks to the bottom, and the bacteria break it down, and in doing so, take oxygen out of the water. And the water becomes anoxic. Sewage dumping into water is a significant problem of eutrophication. And it's difficult because the nutrients that are being used are very important for producing food for the world. So how do you get around that? There are many controversial ways, such as GMOs, genetically modified organisms.
And that has another whole discussion.
There's another whole area on it. Yeah. But water is absolutely important.
Well, I can see that. Well, we have to take a break right now, Frank, but when we come back, let's talk more because our oceans and our seas and our air are so important, and we want to hear more about the Mass Maritime Academy. We'll be right back.
They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. but I didn't listen. I made my way. And now, I am what I've always wanted to be.
We're back here now talking with Frank Vale. And, you know, I remember we were talking about water and all the kinds of eutrophication, you called it.
Yes.
But I remember as a child in the Lower East Side of New York City in Manhattan, we used to go over to the East River. And I remember the older people then saying, we used to swim in the East River, but now look at it, it's so polluted. So many things are dumped into the ocean. So maybe you could continue talking about the dangers that face our oceans and the sea-based pollution I hear about.
Sure. I mean, eutrophication is clearly a primary cause for degradation of our waters. But you have many other areas. You have overfishing. I mean, that's a real concern, and it gets into some very social economic issues. But Georges Bank is being depleted. The science shows that. And yet you have individuals who their whole lives have been involved with fishing, and you're taking that from them. So there's very complex issues, but some protection has to occur. Furthermore, our oceans serve as a tremendous basin for sequestering carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases. If we start destroying the algae, the plankton, the phytoplankton, which sequester this, we're going to have problems. We're going to increase the temperature, and we're not going to be able to sequester as much carbon dioxide. There is a very interesting, there is an international program called MARPOL that deals with pollution of the seas. And most mariners know all about it. It tries to address the issue of what goes up, stacks on ships, as well as oil pollution, as well as garbage and so forth. And most communities or most countries that are signatory to it, I think it's about 98%, are involved in the maritime industry. So it's a very powerful tool that's internationally based. And of course, to save our oceans, it has to be international.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that this is going on because the average Joe doesn't have a clue. And I'm sure if you're a fisherman, you're seeing it from a whole different perspective too. But
Yes.
This is so good that people are tending to it and internationally. I don't think today everything is global, isn't it?
It is. I mean, environmental pollution, environmental problems are worldly. They're global. They have to be addressed in a global fashion.
Well, since I met you, as I mentioned earlier, on Earth Day back in the public school where you came in from Texas Instruments,
Yes.
one of the top men there, and here you arrived at our school, did a wonderful job.
Wouldn't call myself top.
Well, you were very instrumental in. I remember you had to rush back one day. You had people coming from Korea to see what you were doing with water. So your humility is very lovely. But you've always advocated the idea that a healthy environment is so important. And now you're at the Mass Maritime Academy. So I want to know what you're doing there. Number one, what is Mass Maritime Academy and what are its major goals, first of all?
Well, it's a state university. It's the oldest maritime academy in the country. And it began 1891.
Oh.
And it's had two different locations. Well, actually three. I think for a while we were right next to the Constitution, then moved to Hyannis, and then from Hyannis, for many years now, we've been at Taylor's Point in Buzzards Bay. The real mission initially was to develop individuals for the commerce of the world, global commerce, ship captains, marine engineers. But then it diversified, and it's diversified into a number of areas, as you can see. I mean, we're a specialty university of the Commonwealth, and we have a number of majors. One, marine transportation, marine engineering, facilities management, international maritime business, my department, which is environmental protection, as well as emergency management, two separate entities within the department we call EPSIM. And we now have a new called Energy Systems Management, a new major. So I think I've gotten most of them there.
Yeah, it's a wonderful
but very
spread
specialized.
Yes, but still opening the doors for many opportunities. And before we go too much further, I have to tell you, I saw the movie called The Captain, I think was the name of
Yes.
it, with Tom Hanks.
Yes.
And I found out in my reading that Captain Richard Phillips from the Maersk at Alabama, that ship that was attacked during the Somali piracy,
Right.
he's an alum
Oh, yes.
coming from Mass Maritime. And then also a Paul Fenton McCarthy, who was the commander of the Navy's 7th Fleet. These are just two I happened to find that they're alum of Mass Maritime. I was
Yeah, a
quite amazed.
lot of very famous alums, and you know, it's a regimented school, and it's not an easy school to get through. It's a very demanding curriculum, very demanding in the regiment. I mean, most college students don't have to be up at 7 o'clock in the morning or earlier, undergo inspections and be held to certain standards, but they do it willingly. And I think the end product is great. Now, I teach at Holy Cross and I teach at Mass Maritime, and I'm both very proud of the students that come out of both institutions. Maritime, though, it's a real grind for them to get through, you know.
It's almost like joining the Army or the Navy or something, isn't it?
Well, for the first year, but their objective is to teach duty and leadership along with being well prepared to go out into industry or government or into the maritime fields.
And some may go into educating too, don't
Oh,
they?
sure,
To teach
sure.
these topics that they've become experts
I
in.
mean, you find maritime people in the Coast Guard, in the Navy, in NOAA, in numerous different areas, in industry.
I was going to say, and also, don't the shipping world, the
yes.
people who manage that?
There's more. I think there's a significant number of maritime graduates that live down in Panama with the Panama Canal. And I think there's a tradition where, as a maritime graduate transit the Cape Cod Canal, they blow their horn a couple of times to let them know that they're a graduate.
Going
So
by.
a lot of great tradition, as it is in most service academies, military academies.
And as in most New England.
Yes.
Yeah, here we are the birthplace of all kinds of education. You're teaching a course, I think it's called Environmental Protection and Safety.
Well, no, I teach 2 courses this semester coming up. I teach environmental law,
Environmental law.
and then I teach a course called Current Environmental Problems. I really enjoy I enjoy both courses. And being the chairman, it's nice because you don't have to teach as many because you have other duties. So I have my 2 favorite courses, and Current Environmental Problems deals with the problems that society is facing today in the environmental field. And it goes into the basics of environmental science, you know, understanding trophic levels, understanding the chemistry of pollution and so forth. Whereas environmental law takes off from that and says, here's the scientific knowledge we have. How do we now legislate? How do we control society and do it fairly and so forth? So students get kind of a basic overview of law, and then we look at some of the statutes and apply a lot of science in it.
Well, I don't know anyone better prepared because you just said it's both the engineering, the science,
Yes.
and the law. And I'm sure you have a good time doing it.
I enjoy my students.
Yeah, well, you've always enjoyed life. And you mentioned some of the careers that they are prepared for. And have you seen one that's more?
Well, I'm very proud. I mean, I've been taking my students to the National Association of Environmental Managers Conference, and, you know, we've developed a little student chapter. And these are basically Fortune 200 companies and the environmental managers, and they come and present. My students will present, give a little paper, and they get more job offers. And I am truly amazed at the number of jobs that are offered to our students leaving
wonderful.
the university. But they're well educated when they leave.
And disciplined. from
And
what you
disciplined,
said.
and they know how to communicate. They do
Yes.
an excellent job in communications. So they're you know, I'd like to say we have a great product when they come out.
Yeah,
And they
sounds
work
like
hard for it,
yeah,
believe me.
yeah. I was also interested, I think you mentioned that the students go out on the USS Kennedy
Yes.
ship, or there used to be another ship, Constitution or whatever, I forget,
Enterprise,
the
yeah.
Enterprise before that. And can you tell us a little bit about what kinds of, they actually go out on a ship?
Yeah, they go out for 7 weeks, and they generally go to the Caribbean. A few years back, they would go to Europe, but MARPOL and burning of fuels and so forth has kind of stopped that, at least for the time being. But they go down to the Caribbean, transit at times the Panama Canal, go into South America. And the marine engineering and the marine transportation students get a real good exposure to being out there. The other students, the other disciplines that I told you about, are also taking part in different types of programs on board. And the idea is that students rotate through each of the disciplines on board the ship and then make a decision what they want to major in. This would be the freshmen that go. However, that's changing in the future. This year was the first change. Students that are not in marine transportation or marine engineering are going to go only for 3 weeks. And they'll switch off and go for another 3 weeks. After this year, my department as well as the other departments will not be going to sea. They'll go for an initial cruise of maybe 10 days. But from here on in, we have to find something else.
Yeah, well, knowing you, you'll be creative. They'll get their education. It's almost like they have an internship, if you could call it that, when they're right out there on the ship. Just very briefly now, and looking to the future, are you optimistic or pessimistic about what's going to be happening to our planet?
I'm optimistic. I've always been an optimist. I think that more and more people are becoming aware of these issues, and I think that they care about future generations and want to do the right thing.
Well,
and that goes across the boards.
Well, part of it is because people like you are willing to give up your time and from your busy schedule to come on School Talk. And who knew we'd have YouTube when we first started some 20-some years ago. So we're delighted that you could come. I am personally delighted. It's so good to see you, Frank, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Naja. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks. I'm going to close with the words of the late Dr. Margaret Mead. She was a famous cultural anthropologist in the 60s and 70s, and she said, almost prophetically, we won't have a society if we destroy the environment. Well, environmental education will continue to be an investment in our future, and it certainly will be a topic that we will continue talking about here on School Talk.